They lie. And these mail-in ballots are a disgrace, and they know it.
Ahead of the 2020 election, Donald Trump was unequivocal about mail-in voting.
There's a lot of dishonesty going along with mail-in voting.
There is no way you can go through a mail-in vote without massive cheating.
They're being sold. They're being dumped in rivers. This is a horrible thing for our country.
But after multiple disappointing elections, Trump and Republicans are now touting early and absentee voting.
Republicans must compete using every lawful means to win. That means swamping the left with mail-in votes, early votes, and election day votes.
And in an election that is expected to be close yet again, the number of people who vote early and absentee could decide the outcome. Trump himself voted absentee repeatedly over the years before demonizing it in 2020.
President Trump clearly viewed early voting as a strategic disadvantage to his chances of winning, and so therefore he spent the bulk of the year talking about voter fraud before most Americans had even cast ballots.
2 months after Trump lost the White House, Republicans lost the Senate.
Rural white voters stayed home in larger numbers than other demographic slices. And so that tells you that there was this very real impact of the rhetoric criticizing absentee voting, early voting.
By 2022, some Republicans were still warning voters against early voting.
Vote in person. Don't try to mail a ballot in if you've got early voting, because it's not going to count.
If you want honest elections, very simple. Same-day voting.
That November, Democrats again outperformed historic trends in the midterm elections, though not all Republicans blame Trump's rhetoric.
I would argue it's suppression of information. That's the thing that really matters when it comes to elections, not the rhetoric of President Trump on mail-in balloting.
Ahead of the 2020 and 2022 elections, a majority of Republican voters were not confident that mail votes would be counted accurately. And in both elections, Democratic voters voted by mail at a higher rate than Republicans.
Any person who's ever worked on a campaign knows that it's effective to bank those votes through early voting, and it frees up your resources.
And after the 2022 midterms, Republicans launched a new effort to do just that.
To win close elections, we need to close the gap on pre-election day voting. That's why we're launching the Bank Your Vote initiative.
Republicans face two key challenges headed into the 2024 election: low confidence among their supporters in early and absentee voting, and new state laws that restricted some ways that voters vote.
Some states have restricted early voting hours. Some states have made it more difficult to vote by mail. The challenge that Republicans face now is preventing those restrictions from affecting their voters.
Congressman Byron Donalds is the co-chair of the new RNC initiative, Bank Your Vote.
If you look at any election, turnout more than anything else is the driver of election success. What we're really trying to do is get Republican voters to start returning those ballots early.
Citizens see these ballots going out and coming in, and they need to have some assurance that there are protections and safeguards around that process.
Derek Lyons is the president and CEO of Restoring Integrity and Trust in Elections, a new Republican-led group that has spearheaded lawsuits often aimed at tightening election laws, including around early and absentee voting.
I think going back a couple of cycles, one thing we saw in 2020 was sort of a lot of last-minute changes to the way the elections in this country are run, massive expansion of mail-in, balloting on the fly in many instances.
There was a claim by the Republicans who passed these laws that these laws were meant simply to address fraud. Privately, the same Republicans authoring some of these bills said, look, I've got to do something. My constituents are clamoring for new restrictions because they believe there's widespread fraud.
It's really people seeking to undermine confidence in those results who are to blame, despite the fact that they've never been more safe and secure.
Al Schmidt helped oversee the 2020 election in Philadelphia as a Republican city commissioner.
I was a Republican election commissioner in Philadelphia. I assure you, there was a lot of attention paid to making sure that elections were run in a free and fair and safe and secure way.
Pennsylvania was one of two states that congressional Republicans objected to certifying after the 2020 election, and Donalds did not rule out objecting again in 2025.
If there are issues where states were avoiding election procedures that were passed by the legislature, ignoring them out of hand, or if there was some clear subversion that was going on, members of Congress have a responsibility to speak to that.
The 2024 presidential election may again come down to narrow margins, which increases the stakes for how campaigns utilize early and absentee voting.
Early voting at first is about convenience to voters, but then politicians start thinking, well, maybe there's an advantage for my party in this. And that's where we are today.
The most important thing that people can do to help strengthen confidence in elections is to stop lying about them. People have chosen the path they've chosen for partisan political reasons, and it's really confidence in our democracy that's paid the price.
And Trump's rhetoric around early and absentee voting is likely to play a central role again in 2024.
It's going to be very interesting to see just how much Trump's rhetoric changes, and if he's still talking a lot about fraud, that's definitely going to be, off message from what the RNC is trying to do here.
We want to have elections, by the way, all paper elections. We want voter ID, and we want no mail-in ballots, no mail-in ballots.